The largest improvement anyone can make to their World of Warcraft performance, regardless if you're a tank, a healer, or a DPS, is to leverage the various spell buffs given to your character and apply them correctly to your rotation. Tracking all of these different buffs can be cumbersome, with multiple buffs, stacks, and empowerments to be aware of. WeakAuras can be used to help offset the cognitive load of tracking these buffs, allowing you to know at a glance when to press certain abilities over others. If you've been wanting to learn how to track these spell buffs and improve your gameplay, then you've come to the right place, friend. Today I wanted to do a deeper dive within WeakAuras, specifically in tracking spell buffs. The scope of this guide will be focused on managing additional triggers and complex conditions for spells. The goal is to enhance our rotation auras and provide clearer information on when to use our spells for better performance. This guide is a continuation of my previous Getting Started with WeakAuras guide, which covered the creation, positioning, and cooldown tracking of spells from scratch. This guide assumes that you already have WeakAuras created, which tracks spells and their cooldowns. If you don't have any auras configured, be sure to check out the Getting Started with WeakAuras guide, which I've annotated now, before continuing. Hi everyone, welcome in. My name is Rothmar. My goal is to help make World of Warcraft more approachable to everybody. I've spent a lot of time in this game, and I want others to enjoy it as well. Without getting too delayed, let's go ahead and jump into learning WeakAuras buffs. In this example, I'm working on improving my WeakAuras for my Enhancement Shaman. I have all of my spells created, but they're missing buff tracking to help inform me on when an optimal time to use the spell really would be. As a quick note, the importance of a spell and its buffs will change based on your spec, the build that you're playing, and the fight that you're in, which is a really deep and ever-changing rabbit hole, so we are not going to focus on the specific nuances of build optimization for right now. Instead, we're going to be solely focusing on how to track buffs and then change a spell aura to give it more attention. To begin, let's take a look at one of my Enhancement Shaman spells named Lava Lash. The aura that I have for the spell is using two basic triggers, one for tracking the cooldown of Lava Lash, and one for tracking the spell activation overlay glow, also for Lava Lash. Alongside this, it has two conditions, the first one tracking to be when Lava Lash is on cooldown, and the second one showing when the overlay is active to show a glow. This is okay for beginners, but we're missing vital information such as the buffs that Lava Lash gets to allow us to do our big damage. For Lava Lash, there are two talents which we want to track, Hot Hands and Ashen Catalyst. Let's briefly cover what these do. Hot Hand is a chance to gain a short buff when meleeing. When we gain this buff, our Lava Lash gets a shorter cooldown and does more damage, meaning that we'll be casting it more frequently. So we want to be aware of when we gain this buff so that we can prioritize Lava Lash over our other abilities while Hot Hand is active. Ashen Catalyst is a buff that stacks in the background while our Flame Shock dots tick on targets. We want to track when we have 6+ stacks of Ashen Catalyst so that we can dump these stacks back to 0 and allow Ashen Catalyst to begin building up again in the background. Again, do not focus on the specific numbers or buffs, just be aware that these are two examples of buffs that we might want to track. This is a WeakAuras guide and not an Enhancement Shaman guide. Okay, so we have our two buffs that we want to be aware of. One is a short-term buff and one is a stacking buff, both of which would alter when we want to cast Lava Lash. Let's begin with adjusting our WeakAuras so that we can start tracking both of these buffs. Within our Lava Lash aura, go to the Trigger tab at the top. Be sure that the trigger combination at the top is set to any triggers and not all triggers. After that, we're going to add a new trigger. This should default to the settings that we need, but make sure it says type aura, unit player, and aura type buff. Next, we'll scroll down to the box labeled names and check it. Then we can enter in the name of the buff that we want to track. In our case, it's called Hot Hand. You can also enter in the spell ID here if you need to. You can get that from places like Wowhead, but we'll just stick with the name for right now. By default, the aura will always set at the bottom to show on aura found. Personally, I like changing this to always, just because it makes the condition tab more human readable later on, but this is technically preference. Now that we have our Hot Hand aura created, we'll go ahead and duplicate this trigger, open it up, and change the second name to Ashen Catalyst. The next step in this process is to add display elements to the aura, which are visual items that will display on our screen when the buffs are detected. In the case of Hot Hand, there are two things that I care about. One, do I currently have the Hot Hand buff? And two, how long is remaining on Hot Hand? For Ashen Catalyst, there's only one thing that I care about. is there currently 6+ stacks of Ashen Catalyst? So let's go ahead and add those 3 things. 1, text indicating if Hot Hand is active. 2, text showing the duration of Hot Hand. And 3, text showing if we have high stacks of Ashen Catalyst. To do this, we'll go ahead and head over to the Display tab. I'm going to go ahead and collapse all these different sections so that we can very clearly see what we're working with. I currently have a border, I have a glow, and I have 1 text. We're going to add a new text, and we're going to change the display text to say HH. This is short for Hot Hand. You can name this whatever you want to, this just works for my brain. Personally, I'm going to do some quick font adjustments. Then we'll go ahead and disable the show text box to make sure that this text does not show by default. Then we can duplicate the text 2 to get text 3. Then we'll go ahead and change the display text here to say %3.p and hit OK. The %3 here targets the 3rd trigger. So if we go to trigger and look at trigger 3, we're looking at Hot Hand. The .p means progress, which you can see in the tooltip up at the top here. So we're essentially saying, show us the progress of the 3rd trigger. Once again, we'll turn this text off so that it's not showing by default. And we'll duplicate our text 1 more time to get a 4th text element. And we'll have this one trigger for our Ashen Catalyst at high stacks. You can enter the text whatever you want. You could say something like AC, which is short for Ashen Catalyst. Personally, I like to enter the phrase 6+ because it helps inform me what the stack count is. Just be sure to disable the show text again so that all these new texts, text 2, text 3, and text 4, have show text hidden by default. We'll turn them on later via conditions. I also already have a glow element on this aura. Be sure to add one if you don't have it. Also be sure that the glow is high up on this list so that the glow will display below our text and not on top of it for legibility purposes. The higher in the list something is, the lower it is visually within the aura. We now have triggers to watch for both buffs and display elements to inform us of the buff statuses. Now it's time to tie all of it together with a few conditions. Conditions will allow us to watch the triggers and alter the display elements based on the current state of the buffs that we're tracking. Let's start with setting up a condition for Hot Hand. As a reminder, we have 2 things that we want to display. If Hot Hands is active, show the phrase HH, which is text 2, and show Hot Hands is active with the remaining duration with text 3. Go ahead and navigate to the Conditions tab. As a reminder, I already have 2 conditions on this aura, one for tracking the cooldown and one for tracking the glow status of our spells, but we can go ahead and ignore those. Let's make a new 3rd condition. Let's go ahead and add a 3rd condition. And we're going to have the 3rd conditions if section look at trigger 3, which is the Hot Hands buff, and set the trigger value to aura found with a subvalue of true. Next, set the then section to have the following. We'll have the 1.glow type set to pixel glow. Then we'll click add property change to alter a few more things. Click add property, and make text 2 visibility checked. Next, add 1 more property change, and we'll set text 3 visibility to checked. What this should do is when we find the Hot Hands buff, we'll have the glow showing thanks to condition 2. We'll change that glow type to a pixel glow, and then we'll show both text 2 and 3. And if we come over, 2 is our Hot Hands text, and text 3 is our cooldown tracking for the buff. As always, I highly recommend going and testing your auras now that we've hooked up everything together to check for issues. To test this, I'm going to go ahead and run up, start meleeing some things, and attempting to get a Hot Hand proc. So we can look up here for our Hot Hands procs and make sure that when we get it, which you see here, it matches the aura here. So we see Hot Hands and we see a duration below. When we press the spell, it goes on cooldown, it grays out, but we still see the duration and we see that Hot Hands is still active. Luckily, mine works as expected because me testing an aura is the equivalent of a celebrity chef having a fully baked and dressed dish just off camera ready to go. But if you discover any issues or bugs, alter the settings necessary and then test again. It's an iterative process and sometimes it does take a few tries. Next, we can set up Ashen Catalyst. We'll pop open WeakAuras again, head to our Lava Lash spell, and go to the Conditions tab. Then what we can do is we can add a new condition, condition 4, and we'll change the if statement to look for trigger 4, which is our Ashen Catalyst, and we'll look for a sub option of stacks. Afterwards, set the middle sub-option to the greater than or equal to option. Remember, the caret here always eats the bigger number, so we're looking for greater than or equal to, and we'll type in 6. Under the then section, we'll set text for visibility to checked. Next, we'll add a property change, and we can set the glow 1 value type to action button glow. This is optional, but personally I like to differentiate multiple buffs visually so that I can tell them apart. While this is great and dandy that we have both of our conditions set up and functioning properly, I should note that we've now introduced a potential overlap when you have multiple buffs. There will be times when we have both Hot Hands and Ashen Catalyst at 6 stacks. And with our current settings, there will be a lot of text atop our icon, which can be a jumbled mess. When there's too much information on the icon, it's difficult to tell what exactly is going on, but we can clean this up with additional conditions if we want to. I wanted to go ahead and illustrate what this looks like if we have both Hot Hands and Ashen Catalyst. So you can see here, I have Hot Hands and the 6+. There's just a lot going on. This doesn't look very good. If you want to clean up this clutter, you can optionally add a 5th condition to handle this. We'll go ahead and pop open WeakAuras, head to Lava Lash, and we'll add a new condition for condition 5. What we're going to do is we're going to set the if section, scroll up to the top, and we're going to look for combinations, and we'll set it to all of. Within this, we'll now get this little bullet point. This is kind of where we define multiple if statements all at once. We'll set this first bullet point to say trigger 3 or if found true. Then we'll set the second bullet point to trigger 4 stacks, and we'll set it to greater than or equal to 6. So essentially we're saying if we have Hot Hands and we have enough stacks of Ashen Catalyst. Then what you can do is you can go ahead and set the text of Ashen Catalyst, which is text 4, to visibility false. This essentially says that if we have Hot Hands active and Ashen Catalyst has all the stacks that we want, please don't show the text for both of them, just show me the Hot Hands text. Naturally, since Ashen Catalyst's initial condition 4 comes after our Hot Hand condition, as seen here, the glow type that we defined for each will overwrite one another. This means that as a baseline, Hot Hands will have a pixel glow, and if Ashen Catalyst ever gets more than 6 stacks during a Hot Hands window, the glow type will change from that pixel glow to an action button glow temporarily. So we can still tell when that happens, though honestly we'll be pressing Hot Hands anyways. I just wanted to illustrate it. There are a number of ways to accomplish this. Some are more optimized than others, but at the end of the day, do whatever works best for your brain and what helps you understand what you need to do and what you want to put your time into. You can accomplish this with less conditions, more conditions, all are valid, and you can refine them with time as you grow and get used to how auras work. This should provide a better baseline understanding of how buff tracking works, illustrating both a normal buff on a timer as well as stack-based buffs templates to operate off of. I hope that this guide helps to demystify some of the ways that buffs can be tracked using WeakAuras, allowing you to feel a little bit more confident when it comes to tackling your own. If this guide helped you learn buff tracking within WeakAuras a little bit better, please be sure to leave a like on the video so that fellow players can find it as well. If you found this guide enjoyable, but wish I'd cover additional information within WoW, or specific topics even within WeakAuras, please let me know. I highly value community feedback and would be enthusiastic to help lower the barrier of entry to anything that I can. And, as always, if you want to see more World of Warcraft guides from me in the future, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of the future videos that I put out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, please remember to be safe out there and be nice to the fellow players.